So just speaking about Twitter's user numbers, there are 271 million active users on Twitter right now, and that number's growing. So since the beginning of time, people have been influencing others with less than 140 characters. I think when Twitter started, everyone kind of thought, wow, 140 characters, this thing's silly. Obviously, there's a bit of history to that. Twitter originated as a text messaging platform using SMSs, and it evolved into an internet-based platform. But people have been influencing us for a long time with less than 140 characters. Gandhi, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Einstein, anyone who has never made a mistake, has never tried anything new. Mother Teresa, if you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one. 55 characters. And then Mandela, it's 44 characters. It always seems impossible until it is done. So some pretty powerful statements in far less than 140 characters. And one of my favorite tweets, the first tweet from the CIA, just showing how clever you can be with 140 characters. Nearly 302,000 retweets. But I've seen quite a lot of quotes that really, where people have commented that when Twitter came along, it showed us how creative we really can be, that you can still get really creative with such a limited space. Obviously, Twitter has evolved. We have Twitter cards now. You can tweet rich media, video, but the core history of Twitter is around these 140 characters, and brands continue to do some very clever things. And even the Pope tweets, and I love that. I think it's pretty cool. So then how does SA use Twitter? And a lot of this data is sort of confidential. You can tweet it if you want to. But all of the data is from a Nielsen survey that we conducted in June. So it's pretty recent, and we believe it's pretty accurate. So first of all, Twitter's an everyday activity. We also use Twitter whilst we're watching TV. So 64% of South Africans use Twitter alongside TV. I'll show you some data later on that also shows how predictable our behavior is during television, which is really interesting, and it's a great opportunity for brands. Also, 36% lowest cost per acquisition when a brand has cross-marketed across both TV and Twitter. So I think a really powerful fact there. 35% of us use Twitter while shopping. I know that I do. I actually photographed a girl in the vitamin sort of supplements area last weekend, where I think she was busy I'd walked past and she was on Twitter and she was asking a community about if it was a good product or not. So this is a story that I uncovered recently. If anyone's ever seen a presentation, we talk about Twitter Town. There's a mayor in Spain that governs his whole town called Jun with Twitter. But recently I discovered that there's Chief Kariuki in Kenya who governs a town on Twitter himself, and that's him with President Kenyatta. And Chief Kariuki actually uses Twitter to help his community find lost livestock. He saved lives. It makes for interesting reading. You'll see that, so these are two of the testimonials from his website. He's actually saved people's lives from gangster attacks. This lady at the top, Agnes, she actually tweeted that gangsters were approaching her home, and the mayor sent a police force to save her. People's livestock, if you actually follow him, livestock gets found every single day. He sends out a very accurate description. A lot of it is in Swahili, but luckily my Swahili is coming on, so I'm starting to pick it up. But I think it's a fabulous story. What's really interesting is that he has 22,000 inhabitants in this town, but he has 37,000 followers on Twitter. And the President Kenyatta has actually got him teaching other chiefs how to use Twitter to police and to govern their towns around Kenya. Personally, this is my personal opinion. I reckon that Kenya streaks ahead of the rest of Africa, including SA, in terms of how they use Twitter. I think that part of it is because they have infrastructural challenges that we don't have. So for a lot of these people, it's not just a sort of time waster or about discovering and connecting. It's actually about getting around and surviving, finding out which road is safe. How do I get from A to B? And so another example here, which you may have seen, this happened in 2012 in South Africa. It was just a girl's boyfriend got hijacked and put in the boot of his car. And he texted her and she tweeted it. And Within a couple of hours, I think it was a space of 1 hour and 40 minutes, armed response guys got involved and actually rescued him and recovered the car and saved his life, which is a powerful story. And so the key message of those 3 stories that I've just shared is that Twitter is live, public, and conversational. Twitter internally views himself more as a public information platform rather than as a social network. We've seen Twitter being instrumental in introducing government reform in countries like Egypt and Turkey. Twitter takes local news and makes it publicly available to the world. So what is the value of a follower? So 68% of your followers, this is local data by the way, from South Africa, 68% of your followers visit your website, 53% of your followers actually search for your brand on Google and Bing. So what I love about this data is that, so the one thing about Twitter is that the engagement levels are unprecedented, not just on social media, but on any form of digital media. But it's great to see that this engagement cascades outside of Twitter. It wouldn't be great if you're just getting a lot of retweets, but not actually driving revenue or driving action outside of Twitter. And so to really come to the business end of that, 41% of your followers tweet a positive experience about the brand, and 53% of a brand's followers actually buy that brand. So we all saw Bendgate so iPhone's a notorious bendy phone, and I just wanted to talk about the conversation around that. So the conversation volume was huge, 285,000 tweets, but I guess what I always like to point out is what does a tweet mean? What does a retweet mean? How many people were reached? So 285,000 tweets actually generated more than 1 billion tweet impressions, which is absolutely enormous. And I just wanted to show you how a few brands got involved. So Heineken, dear Apple, no worries, it happens to all of us. It happens to some of us all the time. Pretty cool piece of content. Nokia, will it bend? Bringing back a bit of nostalgia there. KitKat, we don't bend, we break. Actually, generating a huge amount of retweets of that individual tweet. But really 1 billion tweets around Bendgate. And what was fascinating, so this is excluding mentions of iPhone or Apple. This is just Bendgate itself. If you take a look at the 1 billion tweet impressions that were generated, 1/3 of them happened on the day. So vast, it really just demonstrates how live Twitter is. I think that's the one thing that distinguishes it. We use Twitter in the moment whilst events are unfolding around us. So what does a mention or a retweet really mean for a brand? And so here's a bit of data. There's 3 times more conversation when on Safari in Kenya than about going to Safari on Kenya from anyone else in the world. Which is amazing. So people enjoying the experience are busy influencing others who are thinking of the experience. And a typical tweet about a safari experience in Kenya is reaching almost 8,500 people, which is mind-blowing. So the e-tourism conference in Kenya, the guy that spoke just before me, when I was giving the example about sharing our experiences whilst on safari, was actually, their key point was why we're charging our travelers for internet access. They're your biggest ambassadors, and was actually quite fascinating. I saw some, they actually showed some material that had been put together just by travelers who weren't paid, but high definition footage of their safari experience that actually beats anything you could have had produced professionally. It really demonstrates, that, we are brand ambassadors. We're talking about these experiences while we're busy enjoying them. Thank you. Okay. So a simple tweet by Aramat sparks a great idea, and look at the conversation that unfolded. So that conversation was started with a single tweet that was promoted for 3 days, and all of the content you saw was user generated. They didn't tell users to generate content like that. Someone obviously started introducing the before and after and the Aramat bottle, and the community took over. And they promoted that tweet for 3 days, and it generated nearly 11,500 mentions of the hashtag #ButWithAramat and generated 24 million tweet impressions. Okay, so this is just a personal experience. So I was looking for a cool train trip weekend out of Cape Town because I've heard that they exist. And what was fascinating for me, so, I got 15 replies, and probably 10 of them were great recommendations by friends and people that I connect with on Twitter. Not a single response by a brand. So we do see that, I guess an observation in South Africa is that we see a lot of these everyday conversations being overlooked by brands in South Africa. When we talk to banks, we always say to them, you know that you actually have some happy customers, believe it or not. It's not me, but there are some happy conversations out there taking place about your brand. And they kind of go, yeah, we're so focused on dealing with the critics. And obviously, you know, a social platform is not just about pacifying your critics, but about amplifying your fans and your ambassadors, taking opportunities of conversations where someone is clearly prepared to buy that product or buy the service and no one's interacting. But a key point of what I've just shown you is that Twitter really gives us access to influencers and thought leaders. And so, you know, my personal experience that I just shared with you, I've now selected a train trip. The brand actually didn't have to do anything. The people that I connect with on Twitter made suggestions, and I've booked my trip. Cool. So, what is the value of anyone that gets exposed to a brand tweet? So I thought this was quite interesting. When a brand tweets about themselves, 45% of us take action. When someone else tweets about a brand, 63% take action. And when both a brand and someone else that's not part of that brand tweets about the brand, 79% of us take action. When I talk about take action, I'm talking about searching for the brand, following the brand, retweeting, engaging with the brand in a very tangible, measurable way. And 63% of users that act on non-brand originated tweets. I just wanted to share some of the ways that we interact, but 20% of us actually go and visit the brand's Twitter page. 18% of us will retweet that tweet about the brand, and 17% of us, when it's been tweeted by someone else other than the brand, go and actually follow the brand. So some really, really powerful data there. Earned brand, and I guess that just summarizes that earned brand impressions drive action at scale. You know, especially when someone else is talking about the brand, that's the value of having a follower. Followers tend to talk more about the brands that they follow than about other brands, and they drive us to action. And 2 in 3 users actually act on a brand-related tweet, and that's in South Africa, by the way. I think that's a really powerful statement. When we present Twitter, we generally talk about marketing in the moment, defining moments that your brand can get involved in, conversations that represent opportunities for your brand. And I think that really sums Twitter up. So the Christmas conversation in South Africa has grown by 73% in the past year. We'll wait and see what it is this year, generating almost 700,000 impressions on Twitter. And what's interesting is that every tweet about Christmas in South Africa reaches more than 1,000 people on average. So pretty powerful. Again, the power of a tweet, one tweet about Christmas, whether it's Christmas shopping, going on a Christmas holiday with the family, a Christmas lunch, a Christmas year-end function, which seems to really trend in South Africa, by the way. Movies and TV, I spoke about that earlier, and a lot of our behavior during programs is predictable. And so I wanted to touch on sort of the predictability of certain conversations. And around films, so the blue line is the representation of Titanic aired, and the white line is a representation of Titanic aired on a completely different network, both in the UK, 8 months apart. And the conversational behavior and volume is almost identical. And that represents a predictable moment for a brand to get involved. So locally in South Africa, talking about some predictable moments, Tuesday is apparently the second biggest date night in South Africa after Saturday, and surprisingly, Friday is the lowest. For Backsburg, 256,000 mentions of wine in South Africa per month, reaching on average of 40 million unique users per day on Twitter. So I can't talk about South Africa's Twitter number, but we don't have 40 million unique users. So the mentions that are originating from South Africa are influencing a far bigger market than just South Africa, which is a great opportunity. Throwback Thursday, so just showcasing 2 tweets about Throwback Thursday, one from MTN, one from UCT. But what does that conversation that repeats itself really mean? And so just taking a look at the conversational volume around that, 3,300 people are influenced by each tweet mentioned on Throwback Thursday. That's obviously an average, but that's a huge amount of influence. For every tweet or retweet about Throwback Thursday, we influence over 3,000 people. So just in closing, Twitter's a bridge, not an island. 68% of your followers visit your website. A follower is 58% more likely to buy your product, again, South African data. A follower is 2.5 times more likely to tweet a positive than a negative experience about your brand. And 63% of those that are exposed to a non-brand owned tweet about a brand take action. Just one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain: I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. And I think that kind of summarizes the impact of brevity and being succinct and bringing a message across in a short and powerful way. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you.